Last week, we learned about the Every Scout Feeds a Soldier gardening program launched by the Boy Scouts of America during the First World War. This program was part of a much larger effort to harness the power of youth and demonstrate the value and capability of the Boy Scouts as a national manpower asset on a nationwide level. While World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars, just 20 years later, the world found itself once again embroiled in a global conflict, with the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan united against the Allied powers led by the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and eventually the United States. And once again, the BSA rose to the occasion. We'll learn how World War II put the Boy Scouts to work, and specifically about a new gardening program with similar goals to the 1917 to 1919 program in this edition of Artifact of the Week. September 1st, 1939. Germany invaded Poland and World War II began. From the onset of hostilities in Europe, many in the United States, particularly those in education and other civic and social-based organizations, felt the most important way we could protect ourselves and our nation was through the strengthening and promotion of democracy. 1 year later, in September 1940, Scouting Magazine and Boys Life Magazine each published a copy of a statement and pledge endorsed by 16 agencies, including the Boy Scouts. These were organizations such as the YMCA, the YWCA, Boys Club of America, American Federation of Labor, the Campfire Girls, and the Elks Club. Copies of the statement and pledge were also made available through council offices, and Scouts and Scouters were encouraged to sign the pledge and post it where others would be able to see their commitment to strengthening democracy. They also encouraged the sharing of the pledge with others outside of Scouting and advising them to post it as well. In October 1940, the BSA introduced a new program called the Emergency Service Corps. To join the Emergency Service Corps, a Scout had to be at least 15 years old and be a first-class Scout. He also had to have earned these 8 merit badges: First Aid, Firemanship, Safety, Pioneering, Personal Health, Public Health, Life-Saving, and Rowing. The Scout also had to receive written permission from his parents and Scoutmaster, and finally he had to pass a series of qualification tests. These tests included running a mile in 8.5 minutes, climbing an 18-foot rope hand over hand in 15 seconds, and tying 9 knots with a rope over 1/2 inch in diameter. First-class Scouts that were under 15 or had not earned the necessary merit badges or passed the qualification tests could serve as an emergency service apprentice. Scouts in the Emergency Service Corps received special emergency response training as part of the program, making them a resource during a wide variety of emergency situations. Insignia was created both for uniform wear and as armbands. Troops could qualify as an emergency service troop if they had a senior Scout patrol qualified as an Emergency Service Corps unit, could provide adequate leadership for emergency training, and could offer every Scout, regardless of age or rank, the opportunity for intensive emergency response training provided by their Emergency Service Corps patrol. For qualifying emergency service troops, a special ribbon, which was green with gold printing, was awarded to be displayed on their troop flag. During World War II, the Boy Scouts participated in many service projects on both the local and national levels. One of the national projects was food production. Much like in World War I, there were concerns about the nation's ability to produce enough food for domestic consumption to feed our troops overseas fighting the war in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific, and to help provide food to the civilian populations around the world impacted by the global conflict. The food production campaign for World War II involved creating victory gardens under the slogan "Food for Freedom." Scouts and now Cub Scouts started planting home gardens as early as 1940. In 1941 and through the rest of the war, it was common for Scout camps to plant gardens next to campsites to grow most, if not all, of the fresh food required to feed the Scouts while they were at camp. In 1941, Scouts started hiring out as resident farm help. In 1943, it was reported senior Scouts will find it not only patriotic to aid in the Food for Freedom campaign, they might find it profitable. Where the demands of war have drained workers from farm and orchard, the producers of America's food will need the help of Scouts. Many local councils in 1942 operated work camps, and reports indicate such camps were as popular with Scouts themselves as with the farmers whose crops were saved from going to rot. Many other Scouts cooperated in one-day harvest halls. Still others spent long periods on farms as resident helpers. Scouts in farm work camps earned, as a rule, more than the cost of their board, and at the same time enjoyed the usual activities of scout camp. Scout resident helpers too earned money and at the same time benefited from healthy outdoor experiences. Scout work camps are planned for harvest periods. A 1943 publication called Scout Gardens for Victory said, "The war has brought to the American boy a new adventure in the out of doors. America, in harnessing the productive hours of its people, has turned to youth. Scouts have been called to work in fields and farms, to plant home gardens and seedling trees. Rural scouts are on the front line of America's battle for production. This year, town and city scouts will join their country brothers. Thousands of city boys can be country boys in 1943. Scouts of towns and cities, villages, and open country will meet together on America's farms, all patriotic farmers for Uncle Sam." The Accelerated National Food Production Program and the need for mobilizing young workers in agriculture have placed a new emphasis on the agricultural and conservation programs of the Boy Scouts of America. With this program, the Boy Scouts of America are better prepared to participate in the all-out program of Food for Freedom. 9 meals, or 3 days without food, has been quoted as the difference between civilization and savagery. Combating problems of transportation and supplementing the commercial food supply, 1.5 million Boy Scouts and their families are called upon to devote free hours to land close to their home for victory gardens to produce the home food supply. In 1944, Marvin Jones, War Food Administrator, reported that nearly 40%, an almost inconceivable percentage, of the fresh vegetables consumed in the United States came from home gardens, with Scouts being credited for putting in more than 108 million hours to the nation's food production efforts. In 1945, it was reported that nearly 500,000 Scout victory gardens had been planted or would be soon planted since the start of the Food for Freedom campaign. The Scouts were also called upon to increase their production, as it was reported, "We must raise enough food now to supply our armed forces for another year at least, and contribute to the livelihood of the people in the devastated areas of the Allied countries." 1945 also saw the creation of the Green Thumb Certificate and the MacArthur Medal to be awarded for participation in the Food for Freedom campaign. The General MacArthur Gardening Award was offered by the National Gardening Institute to Scouts and Cub Scouts who planted and harvested personal victory gardens that met specific requirements. Medals must not be awarded on the basis of best gardens. This is contrary to basic Scouting policy, and while it is difficult to set up objective standards for gardens that are fair to all, the following requirements, if respected and maintained, will result in only the truly superior jobs being recognized with the MacArthur Medal. At least 400 square feet in size, well-planned, good layout, reasonable variety of products, cared for diligently, good production, on basis of local conditions, all produce harvested and put to good use, no waste, and inspected by a competent inspector. According to the guidance provided by the National Council, the 400 square foot requirement was arrived on at the basis that it represented a big enough job to warrant special recognition, and that it is a large enough garden to be a major factor in the Food for Freedom program. Inspecting the garden was very important to receiving the MacArthur Medal. It is urgently recommended that every Scout garden be visited as soon as possible by some competent adult. 1, stimulating the boy's interest and encouraging his best effort, and 2, discover the gardens that have a chance to qualify for the MacArthur Medal, and 3, give the boys suggestions and technical advice in time to be of value. Since the boys will need continuous encouragement, provide for several visits through the summer. A final inspection is required. This will normally come toward the end of the garden season, but before the last of the garden is harvested. It will be possible at the final inspection to prove that all produce has been harvested and put to good use, but the plans for using unharvested vegetables can be reviewed, and the boys' word that they will be used can be accepted. It was also important to note that the MacArthur Medal was to recognize individual efforts. A limited number of medals will be available to each council without charge. A council with a total of 100 units will receive an allotment of approximately 40 medals. This figure will serve to re-emphasize the standards for the medal should be kept high. Scouts who work in troop and patrol gardens where work is pooled in a common garden plot and where there is the advantage of joint effort and group enthusiasm will be eligible for the Green Thumb Certificate, but they will not receive the MacArthur Medal. This medal is for individual Scout gardens only. It will not be used in connection with other food production projects such as farm work or harvesting. Local councils were the final approval step for a Scout to receive the MacArthur Medal. In the collection of the National Scouting Museum, we have two very different MacArthur medals. In this letter dated December 19, 1945, from Lester Norris to George Ball, it says, "As a trustee of the Institute, you may be interested in the enclosed General MacArthur Award, which is being distributed to some 30,000 youth throughout the country who have done an outstanding job in victory gardening. The Institute has distributed, as of this date, 7,500 medals to state and local victory garden chairmen and 4-H club leaders throughout the United States. The Institute is also furnishing some 20,000 medals to the Boy Scouts of America, which organization is making its own distribution of the medals because of a variation in its rules from those set up by the Institute." With the letter, there is an image of the medal made up of a green ribbon and a bronze medallion, which reads on the front, "National Victory Garden Institute MacArthur Award." On the back it says, "For outstanding achievement in victory gardening, National Victory Garden Institute." In the letter, it states the Institute is giving 20,000 medals to the Boy Scouts due to differing requirements. Based on the May 1945 bulletin and this announcement in the June 1945 issue of Scouting magazine, the red ribbon and bronze medallion, which reads on the front, "MacArthur Garden Award, Boy Scouts of America," and on the back says, "For outstanding achievement in gardening, National Garden Institute," is the medal provided by the Institute to the BSA. Now, I find it interesting that the announcements both include reference to victory gardening on the back of the medal, but the actual medal provided omits the word victory. The other medal in the collection is a green ribbon with a bronze medallion. The front reads National Victory Garden Institute MacArthur Award. The back reads Boy Scouts of America Award for Outstanding Achievement in the War Food Program. Some have said they believe this was awarded to Scouts as an alternative, but I have not been able to find any information to verify that claim. Given the change in word choice on both the front and the back of the medal, it is possible that the award was for participation in the food production program, but different from the individual victory garden, and as a way to signify greater participation in food production beyond the Green Thumb Certificate. Speaking of the Green Thumb Certificate, this was also introduced in 1945 for all Scouts and Cub Scouts that participated in the Food for Freedom campaign of 1945. It is specifically called out for presentation to Scouts who worked on collective garden projects, crop work, work on a farm, fruit picking, and harvesting. Approximately 20,000 MacArthur medals were awarded to Scouts, and nearly 13,000 Green Thumb certificates were issued. Finally, the War Service Emblem, which was announced in the September 1944 issue of Scouting magazine, was issued by the local council to Scouts and Cub Scouts who rendered war service deemed above average. Local councils were responsible for establishing their own standards for the award, with unit leaders recommending Scouts for this recognition. The award, which came as both a metal pin and a cloth strip, was worn on the uniform above the left pocket above the service stars. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Join us next time as we continue to learn more about the history of Scouting America through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.